Let me welcome you to the 55th lecture of NPTEL online certification course Drilling and Blasting Technology. We are discussing special blasting techniques. This is the fifth types of special blasting techniques we are discussing here, and here we will discuss demolition of structure by blasting. So, there are two lectures on this. This is the first lecture on demolition of structure by blasting. But as we do, let us retrospect so far what we have covered. We have covered basically the basics of drilling and blasting technology. We now understand what is explosive, what are the properties of explosive, and how the explosive is reacting with the rock, so that the rock can be fragmented, rock can be blasted, and we know the different blast designs for surface and underground mines, and we know the results of the blast, how that can be quantified, how the blasting cost, drilling cost can be analyzed, and the impact of rock and rock mass parameters on the blasting is already discussed. Now, we are discussing special type of blasting techniques. So far we have discussed ring hole blasting, vertical crater retreat blasting, we have discussed the boulder blasting procedure, underwater blasting procedures also. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the blasting, by using the blasting how we can demolish the structures. So, the objective of this lecture is to understand what is demolition, what are the principles of demolition, how we can carry out the blasting for demolition of the structures, its design concepts, its basics, procedural steps, and what are the precautions required for the demolition of structures by blasting. So, to understand this, first let us watch this video. This is available in YouTube. This basically gives an idea that how the structures, mainly the bridges, chimneys, the high rise buildings can be destroyed easily using the blasting procedures. So, this is one such video where you can see that there are different amenities there in the building, but before carrying out the blasting, all the valuable attachments like windows, panels, other fittings should be taken out, ceilings, fans, ceiling fans, tube light fittings, electrical fittings. Then the blasting has to be carried out, and one pre-requirement is that all the artificial supports provided must be withdrawn prior to the blasting, and then the blasting has to be carried out. So, this is one such example where it is shown that the supports are taken out, then the building is subjected to blasting and the explosive is detonated. The explosives are placed in the critical places, then the blasting is carried out, so that the complete structure will be demolished very easily. So, this is very important, the positioning of the structure and the how the procedural steps, that means the explosive will be detonated one by one, how that has to be carried out, so that the demolition will be carried out, but the demolition should not affect whatever is available in the nearby areas. So, you can see this is a very densely populated area, there are other structures, but it is important that the only the structure which has to be demolished, that will be blasted for its demolition. So, the others should not be affected by that. So, you can see in this case only this particular building, there are other buildings very close to that, but only this particular building is being demolished. So, you can see among all these other structures, only this structure is being demolished, and it is such way it is controlled that there is no effect on the other structures because of the blasting of this one. So, this is the basic objective of the demolition blasting. The matter is very critical, but currently our drilling and blasting technology is able to achieve this one. This is the demolition blasting is being carried out for this particular structure and this chimney, and you can see this demolition blasting is basically carried out in such a way. So, that this one will be simultaneously demolished without affecting. So, this is the first the building. Now, you can see this complete chimney is being coming down and it is basically toppled in particular at one position. So, that it is not being thrown at a larger distance. So, by this way this is blasted, but this nearby building has no effect on this. So, like this way, this is another example of this one, where these two chimneys are being blasted. You can see these two are being blasted simultaneously, but one is not affecting the other one, not it is affecting the other structures which are nearby available. So, these structures are also not being affected because of this one. Now, you see this second one is being blasted. So, this is the way the demolition blasting is carried out, and these are carried out in a very structured way. There are plenty of videos available in the YouTube, and I wish that all of you must see this one, and you will learn a lot of things observing those videos. Now, let us try to understand the basics of this. So, what is demolition? So, basically the term demolition is used for systematic destruction of the structure. So, demolition means it is the destruction. So, but when we are using this term for demolition blasting, means basically we are asking for the systematic destruction of the structure, so that whatever is the desired result we would like to achieve, that must be compiled, and that result we should address by our designing. So, what are the control we required? We control required on fragmentation, throw, safety and environmental impact. That means, we have to produce the size of the elements, that is the structures elements, in such a way that should be that can be handled by our machines, excavator machines or cranes, what will be used after the blasting, that can handle that one. We must control the throw or toppling of the structure in such a way, so that it should not destroy any other nearby structure. The complete excavation process, complete blasting process, that is starting from the drilling to the end of the execution, that must be carried out in such a way, so that it should not show any safety hazard for the personnel who is doing the work, who is carrying out the drilling work, who is carrying out the charging work, that should not pose any danger to them. Similarly, during the blasting also it will not generate any flying element that may stuck to some other say car or any other place where the people are there, and poses a safety hazard to them. So, these are the requirements. Similarly, after the blasting, whatever dust clouds etcetera will generate, the sound will generate, that should be controlled enough, so that it will not create cracks in the windows of the nearby houses etcetera. So, this is the requirement, that we should address this these problems, and we should have sufficient control over this. And the demolition process, and this demolition process can be practiced by the use of mechanical means, using the chemical means, where basically the chemicals are used to destruct the elements, or we can do the blasting for the same. So, basically we are discussing here about the demolition using blasting. So, our we will not discuss a lot about the destruction by mechanical and chemical means, but we will give you some videos related to that. But before that, let us understand the basics of this one. Now, first requirement is that we have to demolish using the blasting, but what is to be demolished? The demolition is done mainly on the structures what we are discussing here, and these structures includes bridges, chimneys, buildings, roads, dams, towers, etc. So, most of these structures are basically the civil structures, and these civil structures are to be demolished, and the material, if you are considering, these are either made of concrete or steel or reinforced concrete or maybe brick, or sometimes it may be stone structures which has to be demolished because of some other requirements. And the components includes basically the foundations, beam, wall, roof, pillars, slabs, etc., which are associated with that. So, if it is a bridges, we may have to destroy the columns, we may have to destroy the decks of the bridges, all these are required. If it is a structure, then the structural element, then if it is a building house, etc., all the elements associated in a building, maybe beams, maybe floors, maybe slabs, those has to be blasted, and that blasted to achieve the complete demolition of the structure. So, this is the essential requirement, and you must know why this demolition is basically being carried out. The first requirement is that the end of the service life. This is very important one. The reason is that if a civil structure is found has already crossed its life, then it must be destroyed, so that as it is crossed its life, means it is no longer withstand the stress that is supposed to this structure has to withstand. So, that is why you have to destroy the structure, otherwise the people will carry on using the same structure, and that may pose danger to the person who are using that one. So, after end of the service life of any structure, that structure must be destroyed. It may be the bridges, it may be the roads, it may be the tunnels also. If the tunnel is already past its life, then it must be destroyed, especially the dams, say water check dams, these are basically withstanding huge quantity of water. So, if it is crosses its shelf life, then the dam must be demolished, otherwise if dam is still standing there, it may collapse on any day because of the water pressure, and that can create dangerous situation to many people. So, that is why after end of service life, the structure must be demolished, and often a structure may be found is a threat to the stability, that is it may become weak before the end of service life also. It may become weak because of some earthquake or because of some other purpose, it may damaged because of maybe some terrorist activities or maybe of poor design, etc. So, if it is creating a threat to the stability, then the structure must be demolished. So, one is for end of service life, another is that if it is the stability is under threat, then all those structures must be demolished. The third part is that the new construction is required. So, new construction it may be required, say suppose say one railway track is there, currently the railway is going on the say renovation, and the high speed train has to come, but the old bridge is not able to sustain that load. So, the old bridge, though it is not end of the service life, but it is not the threat to its stability, but because of the accommodating the new technology, new requirement, the old construction has to be demolished and the new construction has to be made. So, for that case also you have to demolish the old construction to give the space for the new constructions. Next, it may be the possibility that there is a change in the ownership, say one building, that a person has procured one building, and after that he is deciding that it has to be renovated or it has to be changed to some residential building to maybe a shopping mall. So, in that case he would like to destroy that building or demolish that building, so that he can go for the new shopping mall. So, in that case also that decision is made and the demolition may has to be carried out. The next part is the legal obligations or litigations. Say currently in Noida also in India one demolition is made because the highest court, Supreme Court of India has ordered for the demolition of that one. So, that is the legal decision or because of the litigations, though the construction has been made, but that construction is supposed to be demolished, and because of that the demolition has to be carried out. So, that is the legal decision and litigation, and because of that it has to be destroyed. Then inaccessible for maintenance, or maybe the sufficient fund is not available for the maintenance. Many times it is basically occurred, most of the times you will find out this type of problems occurs in case of Olympic villages or World Cup villages, where after completion of that particular event it is found that the generated developed structures is no longer having that much utilization. So, it is becoming problematic for maintaining that structure or maintaining that village, and that much fund generation is not possible. So, in those cases because of the not available of fund for the maintenance, the structures has to be decided to be demolished, and that can be made. And the final one is the poor design. If there is a problem in the designing, then the demolition has to be made. Many times it happened because of the unforeseen condition of the ground, unforeseen condition of the some faults etc., that is available in that place, but prior to that the decision was not there. So, that was not considered in the designing part. So, finally, it has been found that whatever design is there, that is insufficient for that particular case, and whatever when that is understood, before that whatever construction is made, that was supposed to be demolished. So, that is why this problem is there. This is one good example is that there is a big tunnel, railway tunnel in Uttarakhand. That tunnel actually when initially made, it could not end because of the poor surveying result. So, it could not come out in the other side, but later on that fault was basically rectified, and that was passed through. So, like this way there are many cases where different decisions are made. Based on those decisions, whether the structure has to be demolished or not, that decision is basically considered. So, now next is that we have already discussed that we are having demolition process available, whether we can go for a mechanical demolition using excavators or hammer etc., or we can have demolition using blasting. Now, why, on which condition we can opt for a blasting demolition? The benefits basically are that blast demolition is very fast. So, the total time requirement is much lesser than the mechanical. That means, in blasting we just need to place the holes. So, a little time is required to place the hole, then we basically blast it. So, the blasting process is basically a very quick and less time consuming process. So, suddenly we demolish a very high rise structure or very big structure, we demolish it suddenly. So, the total time requirement is very less in case of blast demolition. That is why if we are using a mechanical hammering system etc., that takes months and years to destroy a structure, but and this continuous hammering for months etc., months and years in that particular structure, basically generating huge noise and annoying the nearby residents, that problem may be overcome by using the drilling and blasting process, where basically almost no sound in the drilling, the sound is very limited during the drilling because small dia drilling is carried out. Only the blasting, that is a one time job, maybe 1 or 2 days withdrawal of the resident from that particular nearby area is sufficient enough. So, the inconvenience to the nearby residents are not very prolonged, it is a very short time duration one, and that is why blasting may be considered as one of the good alternative to the hammering system. That blasting process is generally less costly because the basically the blasting price is not very significant one, manpower involvement are also very less, only the cost is required for removal of the debris, that is same for mechanical hammering also. So, it is basically less costly and not very labor intensive because our total labor requirement is much less, and it pose a better safety for the workmen, because when the workmen are inside the building, that time only drilling is carried out. So, actually there is not significant reduction of the strength of the structure during this drilling and charging part, and blasting is carried out when the people are away from the structure. So, that is basically give better safety to the workmen, but while hammering is carried out, the person has to stay very close to the structure and it has to be hammered. So, there is a likely chances any time the structure may collapse on any hammering, maybe partially or maybe fully, and that pose a danger to the hammering personals, those who are there very close to the demolished building. But there are some drawbacks also. First drawback is that the during that execution process, the control over the falling of the building is very important. You have seen in the previous video, as the nearby residential buildings etc. are there, the safety of those structures are important. So, if anyway our design process or the execution of the blasting process goes wrong, then instead of that demolition, during the demolition of that structure, that may hit or struck with the other structures nearby. So, if one structure is single way is available in one field, then it is very easy to blast that structure to demolish. But in a huge residential area where congested roads are there, high rise buildings are available in the nearby area, blasting demolition is very difficult, because the control over the falling of the blasted concrete is very important. So, that is the greatest challenge during the blasting demolition process. Now, let us understand what is the principle of the demolition blasting. The principle is basically that we are having different elements, constructional elements. So, the breakage principle is that we have to just delink or just eliminate the linking of the that construction elements. So, each construction elements, those are joint with each other, that joint has to be eliminated or joint has to be broken, so that the each that united those joints are basically constructing the construction. So, basically if you look into the construction one, basically these are the beams and slabs and pillars, these are basically joint at these positions and they are standing as a structure. So, basically our principle is that we have to break these joints. So, the moment we break this joint, this particular part, this will become free. So, as this will become free, this can be gravitated down by its own weight. So, basically our basic principle is that we have to eliminate the joints or the unions of the constructive elements, so that they can fall down by their own weight. So, the instability occurs and in the structure and the different elements will fall down by their own weight. So, that is the basic principle of the demolition blasting and that is basically practiced. Then to achieve this principle, that means by to eliminate these joints to make the free each elements and gravitate it down by its own weight. The first requirement is that we have to distribute the charge. So, the charge is distributed in such a way, so that this instability may induced, that is the integration disintegration will be inserted into this. So, the charge will be distributed and the structures will be disintegrated into different parts, so that they can guided in one direction, or they can fall down easily and they can be directed towards one direction, so that it will not move out as the flying element from structure to the nearby resident area. So, the distribution of the charge is very important. The charge has to be distributed in such a way, it will give the eliminating the unions, that is the disintegration of the unions, disintegration of the slabs has to be carried out, but it will not be generated as a flying element, and obviously we have to take control over the little bit of air over pressure, so that the nearby window etc. should not in the residential area should not be broken because of that. So, that distribution of the charge is very important in this case, as well as the sequence is also very important. That means, whether we will blast the ground floor first, then the first floor, or the first floor first, then the ground floor, how this initiation has to be carried out, that is the sequence of blasting of the each charges is very important, because that is basically guiding the fall of the structure in the desired direction. So, if it is carried out from one side, it will basically provoke the structure to guide to topple in that side. If it is carried out in from the both side or from the middle, it will guide the structure to be demolished accordingly. So, that is why the initiation sequence is very important for demolition of structure. Now, let us understand the merits and demerits of the demolition blasting. The low cost for the very high rise building, high rise structures, especially if it is a case of chimney etc., using a mechanical breaker at that particular height, very high say 20 meter, 30 meter, 40 meter height, if the chimney height is like that, in that case it is very difficult to use a mechanical breaker. So, that for those special high rise cases, this demolition blasting is very performing much better way with sufficient safety to the working personnel. The demolition blasting is very rapid and the time requirement is very less. It is safer for the working personnel and also safer for the nearby traffic arteries, because otherwise that will basically to be controlled for a longer period if the mechanical demolition is carried out. Uncertainty is also there in the mechanical demolition. So, that is very difficult situation. So, if the mechanical demolition is carried out for the months long, maybe traffic has to be stopped. So, that can be overcome during this, and disturbance is for a very short period, but the work control is very high that is required, and possibilities of conventional loading procedures are basically used. That means, say if the complete structure is demolished, then the conventional loading machines like excavator etc. can be very easily used. In case of mechanical means it is very difficult, because in mechanical way that has to be carried out from the top or from the bottom, that decision has to be taken, and the use of excavator machines or the removal machines, cranes are very difficult to engage them, because the safety threat, because of the safety threat of the operators of that those machines. But there are the demerits are basically the complete designing has to be made prepared with the sufficient risk analysis. So, that is very important. The execution part is very uncertain, that uncertainty has to be overcome during the planning process. If there is a little bit uncertainty, then one should not go for the demolition blasting, and there are huge time may be required for obtaining the permissions, because the legal bodies and the apex bodies would like to be confident enough that the complete execution will be carried out with proper safety. So, that is why it takes time for the apex bodies to give the permission for the demolition blasting. Next is that if something happened, say the complete process fails, it is partially executed and then it is failed in between, then it is a real problem, because now the rectification is almost impossible. You cannot allow anyone to enter in that half demolished structure to see and rectify this one. So, that is why 100% guarantee of the execution is very important for this demolition blasting. Next, the interruption of the traffic in the vicinity of the blast and its removal of the flying objects from the traffic. These are the difficulties which are not commonly occurred in the mechanical hammering system or manual hammering system. These are the problems with this, and one very big problem also there, that if the building is very old, maybe very 100 years 200 years old, in those cases the building plans are not available. So, for that the building blasting planners face very difficulties on designing the demolition blast on those particular buildings, because their plans are not available. No one knows where is the reinforcement, what is the type of material that is being used there. So, now let us understand, because these are some civil words, terminologies has to be used. So, let us understand this terminology. See, this is the figure I have taken from this internet. So, this is called beam, this is wall, this is parapet, lintel, this is foundation. So, these are there. So, these are broadly classified. So, basically we have classified element like this, we classified elements as foundation, walls, pillars, slabs, roofs are also one kind of slab, beams. So, like that way it is classified. You can see the foundation is this one, this is the foundation, this is the walls. Say generally most of the time residential building walls are the brick walls or stone walls, but some cases the walls may be of concrete also, where the shear walls are used, that in those cases walls are concrete made also. These are the pillars which are basically taking the load of the building. These are the slabs which are basically act as the roof etc. For connecting the pillars. There are beams also, which are basically the horizontal element that is taking the load is called beams. So, these are the different elements, and we are having different designing based on this type of elements. We will discuss those in our next class, but prior to that let us look once again that how the mechanical demolition is being carried out. So, this is basically a brick chimney. You can see in this brick chimney basically the manual demolition is being carried out, and you can see in this brick chimney basically one side the hole is made, a structural hole is made, so that it can guide the building that chimney to topple at that particular end, and that is why this initially these structures are made as the support system. These are the wooden one, and basically these supports are basically being broken, so that the structure will topple at this particular, see this is the structures are being withdrawn, so that the building will topple in this direction. So, you can see this building, this chimney will. So, this is basically manual execution of demolition of one building, but one can see how the manpower is very close to that one. Now, the chimney is being demolished. So, this is one example of manual demolition process. This is a mechanical process. You can see this is the breaker. This breaker is basically demolishing by mechanical hammering. This is also withdrawing, this is having a, see these are the brick walls are being basically demolished. Now, you can see this can move also, this is open and can act, this can clamp also, and by this way this demolition, this is demolition equipment which can act, this is holding the complete wall and now pulling that complete wall. So, this is basically, but all this process you can see this is posing a danger to the operator of that machine, because the complete system is being falling towards that particular person where the operator is working. So, this is also one way you can see the two excavator that is basically pushing this structure in one direction to fall this one. So, this is the way the demolition is being carried out. So, this is another one where a chimney is being you can see the chimney is being basically pushed. Now, the excavator is pushing this chimney and see by pushing this one, that is demolishing this one. So, these are the different way the mechanical demolition may be carried out. We will continue with the designing of the demolition blasting in the next class. Thank you.